What is going on, everybody? This is episode one of the Offsetting Penalties podcast. I'm assuming it's only family and friends listening. This is episode one. I'm Joseph, in case on the off chance it isn't a family or friend. I'm a aspiring sports broadcaster. Offsetting Penalties started as a fantasy football page, in which it was served as a way for me to, practice my graphic design, making graphics, and practice my writing as well. And I did that for a couple of years, and it was great, and it was a great experience. And I said going into that I didn't have any expectations of how many followers, all this. I just wanted to do it for practice. And now Offsetting Penalties is transitioning into a podcast, and the same concept applies. I'm not doing this. I'm not hoping to get a bunch of brand deals and monetization. Like that stuff's cool, but the main reason for me to do this is to get more comfortable talking in front of a camera. So we're here and we're doing this. And this is episode one. Last night I recorded a little trial run. And we're going to start today. Today's a UFC episode. So the way we're going to do this is there's going to be 1 to 2 UFC pods a week and 1 to 2 NFL pods per week, depending on the NFL week, if the UFC card, if it's a good card, or even if there is a card. And that way, the people who like MMA but don't really care about football only have to tune into the MMA ones, and the people who like football don't really care about MMA only have to tune into the football ones. And there's no, the two don't cross in the same episode. So if a show's talking about UFC, it's only going to be UFC/MMA, and the same thing applies to NFL and football. And I'm really excited about that. And this is a UFC episode. I'm recording this at almost 9 p.m. Pacific time. UFC Vancouver wrapped up an hour or two ago. A fight night card. I think the UFC's first time back in Vancouver since 2023, I want to say. They usually do 1 to 2 Canadian cards per year. This is their second one of the year. And it was, for a fight night, it was very, very eventful. A lot to talk about here. I'm excited to do it, and I'm just going to jump straight into it. We're going to go fight by fight through the main card and talk about some notable ones down the line and just go from there. And main event, Brendan Allen takes on Rainier de Ridder. And Brendan Allen pulled it out, man. He pulled it out. And I think he took this on 3.5 weeks' notice. This was supposed to be Anthony Fluffy Hernandez's spot. And considering the way that this fight went, if it was Fluffy Hernandez who stayed in this fight and he didn't pull out, that would have been sanctioned murder towards RDR, what Fluffy Hernandez would have done to him based on what we just saw. Because RDR wasn't the one taking this on short notice. So the fact that he was the one who threw in the towel really says a lot about Brendan Allen, and it really says a lot about RDR. Before he joined the UFC, a big knock on him, I mean, if you go to his Tapology, it's just crazy. It's a bunch of finishes throughout his entire career. But the one issue he had and won before he came over to the UFC was fatigue and was a gas tank. And he retired in one of his fights, similar to how he just did tonight. And he looked great so far in his UFC run. And against Whitaker in a grueling 5-round fight, his gas tank held up. But I think the key difference between that fight and this one is Brendan Allen put a beating on him. And people think that gas tank is just something that comes with throwing a lot of volume or grappling a lot. But really the best way to suck someone's gas tank is to put damage on them. And in round one, I mean, RDR's grappling looked freaking phenomenal. Like it looked next level. And we knew this about RDR. Like we knew his grappling was some of the best in the UFC. But round two, they're not dry anymore. They're sweaty after a round of grappling. RDR slipped off the back of Brendan Allen. Brendan Allen took top position, unleashed ground and pound into RDR. And, RDR, who's been a jiu-jitsu guy his entire life, basically, is looking for arm bars, looking for stuff off his back. And it's, you can do that for a bit. But when a guy's on top of you beating you up, at some point you just got to say, okay, I need to stand up. I don't know if RDR was just that confident in his jiu-jitsu or if he was that unconfident in his striking. I mean, we've seen his striking's weird, but his striking's effective with the step-in knees and the clinch work. But Brendan Allen put a beating on him, and after round two, it looked like RDR wasn't going to be able to get off the mat. Round three, RDR got off to a great start, got reversed again. Brendan Allen put more ground and pound on him again. And then after round 3, it was like, oh, this guy might not even be able to get up. And he got up, but of course, round 4 went the same way, and it was just too much. And RDR got to the stool and couldn't get back up. And that was it. It's going to go down as a TKO. And honestly, that's fair because Brendan Allen beat the crap out of RDR tonight. And I've never been a big Brendan Allen guy, and I think a big knock on Brendan Allen, one that me and others have always had, has been the fight IQ. You know, against Imavov, it was poor fight IQ in a fight that he could have won. He's shown some just weird decisions in the octagon, and tonight it didn't look that way. And in round 4, when he knew RDR had no gas left in the tank, Brendan Allen, like 2 seconds into the round, shot a double leg and got it. And that was some of the best fight IQ we've seen Brendan Allen have throughout his UFC career. And this is big, man, because this was a guy who, you know, we all knew was talented enough to be a top of the division guy, potentially compete for a title, but the fight IQ was always an issue. And he's now at the gym in Chicago with Bilal. He was at Killcliff in Florida for a while, and I don't know if that's what it was, but I mean, he looked awesome, and he looked good in the Vettori fight, and he looked even better tonight on short notice. Hell of a win. Just a hell of a win. You know, that's what you do when you're fighting a grappler. A lot of guys, when you fight high-level grapplers, a lot of guys are so afraid of that grappling that it makes them hesitant and they don't play to their strengths. Brendan Allen, grappling is one of his strengths, and he said coming in he was going to grapple, and that's exactly what he did. And it was a phenomenal win for Brendan Allen. Just absolutely phenomenal. Can't say it enough. Great win. And it's going to go down as a round 4 TKO via retirement. And, you know, that's how it went. The co-main event. This fight, Kevin Holland versus Mike Malott. Mike Malott wins, unanimous decision. All 3 judges had it 29-28. Kevin Holland got screwed. Straight up, Kevin Holland got screwed. And he got screwed by Dan Murgliata, the referee. And we're going to talk more about Dan Murgliata later in this episode. Dan Murgliata had maybe his worst night at the office that I can ever recall. He's going to keep his job as a referee. And frankly, you know what? You can have your job, Dan. Probably no UFC cards for a bit after how it went tonight. In round 1, Mike Malott nutshotted Kevin Holland. Okay, it happens, right, guys? Throw kicks and nutshots happen. You know, it's funny when the referees, when there's a nut shot that happens, and they go, it was unintentional, and it's like 99.9% of fouls in the octagon are unintentional, right? Like, the only person that I can think of that's really used intentional fouls to his advantage was Jon Jones, and he would do that slick stuff where he'd eye poke you and kind of throw you off your rhythm and stop the fight, and Jon Jones was really smart with like that. But in today, I mean, and maybe I'm wrong, and it happens every once in a while, but intentional fouls almost never happen. So when a fighter gets nutshotted, of course it's unintentional. What happened to Kevin Holland is he gets the fight resumes and he gets nutshotted again 20, 30 seconds later. You have to take a point. Kevin Holland clearly wasn't right. He used the full 5 minutes and no point was taken from Mike Malott. And that is one of the most baffling things in the world, because regardless of if it's unintentional or not, it's a foul. And if you're going to give them a warning for one, that's fine. But what's the point of a warning if they do it again and there's no foul taken? It's baffling. And granted, the second one wasn't exactly like a clear, like it was a weird knee that also got Holland to the body a little bit. But in the replay, you clearly see Holland's cut move. Like it was, and he took the full 5 minutes. Kevin Holland is always game. Kevin Holland fights 4 or 5 times a year. He's not going in there hoping to get nutshotted and leave with a no decision or a disqualification. That was BS. That was straight up BS. The fact that he got nutshotted twice and no point was taken, and then by the time the 5 minutes were up and Kevin Holland had to make a decision whether he was going to continue or not, of course, Kevin Holland's a fighter, and he continues. He did not look right. The rest of the fight, he did not look right. And it's very clear that when 2 nutshots like that happen, and it clearly disables maybe not the right word, but hinders a fighter the rest of the fight, a point needs to be taken for that to even the field. Malott won 2 rounds. There's no disputing that. But this should have been a draw. And it's going to be a shame that this is going to go on Kevin Holland's record, because Kevin Holland gets a lot of hate from MMA fans, because as active as he is and he's a fun fighter, he's said many times he just wants to get paid. He doesn't have championship aspirations. So people are going to look at the record and see win, loss, win, loss, win, loss, 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 win, win. And it's a shame because they're just going to look on Tapology or Wikipedia, see this as a loss, and write it off, when in reality, Kevin Holland got screwed. Because if Kevin Holland doesn't get nutshotted twice in that first round, it probably looks a lot different, because he was winning up until the nutshots. He dropped Mike Malott in the first round. Good performance by Malott, considering the circumstances. He looked okay. He had some good power in his hands. He was unleashing some good combos boxing-wise. But just a shame that fight went that way. It was on paper going to be a really fun fight, and it still was a fun fight, but Miragliotta screwed that up, especially because a fight later in the night, the Drew Dober fight, which we'll get to later in the pod, Drew Dober nutshotted Kyle Prepolec pretty badly, and for some reason, a point was taken immediately because it was a bad nutshot, and that's fine, right? If it's a bad nutshot, if you want to do that, I have no problem with taking a point on one nut shot. But if you're going to take a point on one nut shot earlier in the night, and then later in the night, a different ref lets a guy get away with two, that's BS, man. And I think Kevin Holland really got screwed, and it sucks. He wanted to get this was his 5th fight of the year, and he wanted to get a 6-1 in, and now he's probably gonna say, nah, I'm cool with 5. I'm cool with 5. But props to Kevin Holland for continuing to fight and not letting it be a no decision. Just a mess. And we've got more about Dan Miragliotta later. The featured fight of the night, Canadian Amin Zahabi beats Chito Vera. It was a split decision, 29-28 on 2 judges' scorecards for Zahabi, 29-28 for Chito on another one. It was a great fight, and it was a close fight. It really could have gone either way. Chito was very pissed off that he didn't get the decision. And, I understand it. He hasn't fought in over a year. He's on, I think, a 3-fight losing streak now. But you can't, when it's a close fight and you leave it to the judges, you can't get mad that it doesn't go your way, especially when you're in enemy territory, right? And the judges aren't going to go, oh, it's a 50-50, I'm going to give it to the hometown guy. But when the Canadian lands a punch in Canada, the crowd's going to react more. When the Ecuadorian does, the crowd's going to react less. It just is. Although there was a lot of Chito fans in the building, I could tell. You can't be mad when you leave it to the judges and you leave a close fight, because Chito had his moments, but so did Zahabi. And when it mattered most, Zahabi really cranked up the volume and was throwing twice as many strikes as Chito was. And that's going to matter, even if the strikes aren't going to land. Chito's very defensively sound with his guard, and a lot of the shots probably hit the guard, hit the arms. But it's you're still, the judges aren't in the octagon. They can't feel if the punches are landing or not. You got to throw some stuff out there. And Chito was just too hesitant at times. And it sucks because, Chito's a much better athlete than Zahabi is. I mean, Zahabi's got this weird, he kind of plots around and does these weird, movements. And he's just a weird fighter to watch. He's a very smart fighter, you can tell. And his style is effective, but Chito clearly had the athleticism edge in this fight and the gas tank edge, I think. And Zahabi's got a good gas tank, but Chito's got that kind of gas tank. Not to mention Chito's got one of the best chins in the UFC. And it just felt like he was just fighting Zahabi's fight. The way I scored it, I leaned Zahabi. I thought Zahabi won the fight. What are you going to do? It's a close fight, and I feel for Chito, but at the same time, you got to put more out there. Especially when you've lost 2 in a row. I don't know where Chito goes from here. I really don't. I think there's a lot of guys at the bottom of the bantamweight division who are going to want steps up, and I think, Chito's going to kind of become a gatekeeper at this point, you would imagine. And that sucks because, Chito, when he's on, he's a fun fighter, but he shouldn't have had that title shot against Suga, and since then it hasn't been ideal, that's for sure. So, lost to Figgy, over a year layoff, and then come back in a loss where you could have done more to win the fight, and you didn't. For Zahabi, good job. I mean, his style is weird, but it works, man, and that's all you need as long as you're winning fights. He called out Sugar Sean after the fight. He's not going to get that fight. That is not a marketable fight. I would be very willing to bet that Sean O'Malley is going to fight either Corey Sandhagen or Song Yadong next. So Zahabi's probably another win or two away from the title. He's got to get a more definitive win. The Aldo fight was very highly debated upon. In this one, although no one's going to complain, like no one's going to be outraged that he got the decision, he didn't win decisively. And even though the bantamweight division's moving quick with Merab constantly defending the belt, they're easily going to look, if Umar beats Batista at UFC 321 next week, they're going to look to him. They're going to look to other people before they look to Amin Zahabi. And, a fight that wouldn't be the worst would be Zahabi versus Davison Figueiredo. Both of them just fought. Figueiredo fought last week, and that would make sense scheduling-wise. And those are both guys who haven't fought Merab, so it's a fresh matchup, but they probably need another win or two. That could make sense as not a title eliminator, but, almost a title eliminator, if that makes sense. The next fight, women's MMA, Manon Fiorot, the French woman, defeated hometown Jasudavicius with a vicious straight left. Round 1 KO, came at 114 in the first round. I mean, I think this was classic striker versus grappler coming into this matchup. I mean, Jasudavicius had won a bunch of fights in a row by submission. It was just dominating, and she was active too. She really had a good case if she won tonight to be next for the title against whoever wins between Zhang Weili and Valentina Shevchenko. But there was a clear striking gap coming into this. Jasudavicius isn't the best athlete, and she isn't the best striker. And Fiorot looked a little weird, and even DC on the commentary was talking about how she was almost like hesitating and stuff. What ended up happening was she was drawing Jasudavicius in straight cross on the chin, dropped Jasudavicius, some ground and pound. Jasudavicius contested the stoppage. She was on her belly, eating hammer fist to the side of the head. The ref's gonna stop that. Shouldn't have gotten caught in the first place. And, that sucks because Jasmine had good hype on her, but good for Fiorot, man, because, she did look like the fight with Valentina in May for the belt was competitive. Like, it just was. And people kind of forgot it because, there wasn't a finish and there was a lot of clinching and grappling in that fight. But it was a close fight. And Fiorot is huge for the division. She's huge. The way I thought this fight was going to play out was Jasmine trying to take her down, and because she's just so big and so strong for 125, it wasn't going to happen. This is not what I saw coming. This is Fiorot's first KO / finish in the UFC since June of 2021, which is wild to think about against, I think it was against Tabitha Ricci, who's a small, strawweight. So good for Fiorot, man. That was a big win that keeps her in the title picture. She won't be next for the title after the Zhang Weili Shevchenko super fight in November because she just fought Shevchenko for the belt. She just had an opportunity. So she's probably a win away. I've seen people saying Alexa Grasso. That could be a fun fight. I think what this does is it pretty much clears up the fact that Natalia Silva is going to be next for the strawweight belt against whoever wins in November. And Natalia Silva's ranked number 1, and she's a fresh matchup regardless of who wins that matchup between Zhang Weili and Shevchenko. So let's do it. And good win for Fiorot, for someone who isn't a huge personality. Women's MMA is already, not loved by the fans. To get a round 1 KO like that in enemy territory, that's big. That's big time. This was wild. Charles Jourdain, flying knee against Davy Grant, ended up subbing him with a guillotine 3 minutes into round 1. Dude, Charles Jourdain is a freaking problem at 135. That dude, he's always been fun. Jourdain's always been a fan favorite fighter. But Davy Grant, who is a tough fighter, even though Davy Grant's on the older side, Davy Grant gives everyone a tough time. And Jourdain, from the jump, was showing these jump knees. And he connected with one partially earlier, and then he connected with one flush. And oh my God. I mean, the fact that Davy Grant didn't go out when he got hit by the knee was freaking ridiculous. Dude, Jourdain, he's only fought twice at 135, but he's a freaking problem. 2 wins, both by guillotine. This one was against really tough opposition. And, 145, he'd been kind of up and down, and then he got KO'd by John Silva, which, it's John Silva. I mean, he looked phenomenal. He looked amazing. It was an amazing game plan, showing the jump knees, showing the stuff down the middle against Davy Grant, who's a guy who throws a lot of kicks, kind of walks you down. It was really great game plan. And then he called out Marcus McGee afterwards. And I thought that was a really smart call out. You know, your 2 finishes since you moved to 135. You were a fringe rankings guy in the featherweight division, and now it just feels like he's found a home at this division, and we haven't seen the chin really get tested, which, you know, is always an issue for guys when they drop down a weight class and have to cut more weight. But really a phenomenal performance. I'm super high on Jourdain right now, and he had a great call out of Marcus McGee to try and get himself into the top 15 against a guy coming off of a loss. Really just amazing performance by Jourdain. I can't get over how great that game plan was, and amazing, just amazing. Now, this is what I was hinting at earlier. This is the Dan Miragliotta special. This is the Dan Miragliotta card. So the main card opener, Kyle Nelson beat Matt Frevola, unanimous decision, 30-27 on one scorecard, 29-28 on the 2 others. And this was an absolute embarrassment of a referee job by Dan Miragliotta. And I remember I was making my little notes for this pod, and I was writing down I literally have it written down right here, absolute embarrassment of a referee job. Little did I know that later in the night he would do what he did in the Mike Malott Kevin Holland fight. So in case anyone didn't watch the fight, or if they just need a recap, Kyle Nelson had Matt Frevola out on his feet at the end of round 1, and he knocked him down and was just pounding him. Pause. It was laying ground and pounding into Matt Frevola, and it looked like the fight was going to get stopped. And, you know, it was one of those situations where it's the end of the round and the fighter is getting beat up, but like maybe you just let him try and ride it out and make it into the second round. And with 3 seconds left, Miragliotta steps in, and everyone thinks, oh, okay, TKO. And TKO, it's over. The UFC broadcast started showing the knockout replay, and this is our blazing knockout of the night. And then all of a sudden you hear Miragliotta say, fight's not over. We're starting up again. That was the end of the round, which is wild, right? Because, you know, this happens from time to time when there's loud crowds. Referees will not hear the horn, will not hear the bell at the end of a round, and the fighters will end up fighting another couple seconds than they were supposed to. This was the opposite. There was no bell that went off. And obviously, I'm in California. I'm not in Vancouver, Canada, in the building. But, you know, they showed that replay with the natural sound like 3 or 4 times. There's no bell. Like, at least the replay that the clip they showed on broadcast, there was no bell that went off. So Miragliotta stepped in with 3 seconds left, and we've seen this in recent weeks. UFC Perth in September. That was the Carlos Ulberg, Dominic Reyes card. You know, Jake Matthews fought Neil Magny, and Jake Matthews thought he had a finish, and then it was like, no, you have to fight. You have to keep fighting. This wasn't a finish. It was the end of the round, and then Jake Matthews like rallied for a bit, and then it ended up falling flat at the end of the fight, and he's contesting it because he's like, dude, you know, we waste a lot of adrenaline going for these finishes, and then you're celebrating and stuff, and to have to level yourself and fight again, it's completely unfair. And I agree. And this was an embarrassment. And whereas Jake Matthews lost that fight against Neil Magny, Matt Frevola didn't end up reversing it on Kyle Nelson. Kyle Nelson still ended up winning a decision. So good on Kyle Nelson to stick it out. But man, you know, like he really had to stick it out because you empty the reserves. When you have a finish, you empty the reserves going for that finish. And he did. And for him to fight another 2 rounds and look good doing it, all props to Kyle Nelson. It was good to see him up a division, get a win like that. And I like Matt Frevola a lot. And Matt Frevola did nothing wrong. You can't be mad at Matt Frevola. He just fought his fight and continued to do what the referee said. So all the respect in the world to both fighters. Just unfortunate that Miragliotta put 2 asterisks on 2 fights tonight. At least with this one, the guy who deserved the win still got a win. It sucks it's not going to go down as a finish like it should have. And whereas with the Kevin Holland Malott fight, the penalty swung the result of that fight, and that was really unfortunate. And then the featured prelim, which I'll dive into as well, was Drew Dober versus Kyle Prepolec. That was Drew Dober's first appearance since he got KO'd pretty viciously early in the year against Manuel Torres. Round 3 TKO. It was a great performance by Dober, but it was another fight that was weird. And this time, this wasn't the referee's fault. The referee actually handled it unbelievably well. Drew Dober hit Kyle Prepolec with one of the nastiest nut shots we've seen in a while. Prepolec was just, he looked like he was dead on the canvas. And this was at the beginning of round 3. And completely unintentional. And in my opinion, if I'm a referee, regardless of how extreme the nut shot is, if there's one nut shot, you don't you warn them, right? Unless you were like continually like throughout the beginning, like let's say throughout the first round, there was a lot of like inside leg kicks that were getting close. So you say, watch the cup, watch it, and then they do, then I understand taking a point off rip. This one was weird because the ref didn't look like he was going to take a point, but because like they got 3-4 minutes into the timer and Prepolec was still down, it was almost like, oh, this is a really bad nut shot. We need to take a point. Regardless, if you want to set the standard of taking a point on fouls no matter what, if it's the first one, I'm cool with that because fighters should not be committing eye pokes, nut shots, anything. You know better. I get that there's accidents, but you know better. If you're really concerned about nut shots, then don't throw the inside leg kicks, right? Don't throw those ones that get close, you know? Don't throw those teep kicks way too low. So I understand both sides of the argument. Regardless, Prepolec took all 5 minutes, which he deserved because it was a bad one. And the fight resumed, and Drew Dober had a point taken away and knew that he had to go for a finish. So Drew Dober did what he had to do. He went for the kill. He got it. He got the TKO win. The Canadian crowd hated it because their hometown boy just got nut-shotted and then KO'd. And it was unfortunate circumstances, but you got to give props to Drew Dober for recognizing in the moment, hey, me losing a point here could potentially cost me a win. I got to go for this. And he went for it, and he got it done. And it was a really good fight IQ in the moment for someone who usually throws fight IQ out the window and just swings and hopes is kill or be killed. So good for Dober. That was a good win. He needed that after, a KO, and he hasn't been on as great of a stretch. He hasn't had as much hype on him recently. And that was that. It was a really good card, though. Those were just the main card and the featured prelim. Throughout the night, Arichi Lang, I hope I'm pronouncing that right, KO Cody Gibson in 21 seconds. That was nasty. Just a right hand down the pipe. Really, really good performance. I think his last fight was against Rosas at the Sphere. And obviously the grappling was an issue, and they were talking about that on broadcast. Like, is he going to be able to stop the grappling? Well, he KO'd him before they even had a chance to grapple. So it was great. And Cody Gibson got caught for trying to throw a naked leg kick. And one of my MMA pet peeves is when fighters throw leg kicks at boxing range without anything behind it or anything in front of it. I can understand if you're trying to land a leg kick, when you're closer, sure, throw a jab in front of it, throw a 2 in front of it, throw a hook in front of it. But just throwing these when you're in the range of getting caught by your opponent's hands, it's stupid. Cody Gibson paid the price for it. Bruno Silva got a submission win over Hyun Sung Park. That was a really good performance. Park, if you remember, was undefeated and then short notice had to step in and fight Tetsuro Taira. And, that was a big step up, and he lost that one. So this felt fair. Like, yeah, he's got a chance to enter the rankings, but it's not against someone as high caliber as Taira, and it's not on short notice. But Bruno Silva imposed his game plan to look good, and Bruno Silva's, he's a ranked featherweight, and he's good. And his last 2 fights before this one were Manel Kopp and Joshua Van, who are 2 of the best flyweights in the world. So he got KO'd in those, and everyone, not everyone, Bruno Silva's not like a hotly talked about fighter, but, I think there was a lot of sentiment like, oh, Bruno Silva is not really anything, and Bruno Silva's still a great flyweight, and he'll, be in the rankings for a while to come. Danny Barlow lost. He was looking good. Jordan Santos beat Danny Barlow in a unanimous decision in a wild fight. I mean, Barlow had him hurt. And Barlow's a really fun fighter. I'm a really big fan of his style. His nickname's Left Hand to God, and he throws just unbelievable left hands. And his kicks are really good too, but he had Jordan Santos hurt and did what, fighters do sometimes, which is when they smell the finish, they go for it. But there's a difference between going for it and draining all your reserves. And Danny Barlow was just swinging absolutely wild, just absolutely wild. And drained his gas tank, started to get caught because when you're gassed, the head movement's not there, the footwork isn't there, and ended up losing a decision. Really fun fight, though. Probably should have been fight of the night. Stephanie, I don't know how to, whatever. Luciano submitted Raven Oliveira, rear naked choke. Azamet Bolkaev lost a KO to Yusri Belaguri. I apologize if I'm not saying that name. That was actually a really fun fight. Belaguri is he's Alex. He trains out of the Alex Pereira Glover Teixeira gym, and Bolkaev had some hype on him. This fight should not have been this low on the card. This could have been a main card fight. Because Bolkaev's a killer, and ever since he got to the UFC, it's been 2 vicious KOs. But Belaguri, really, he was a guy who fought Alex Pereira in kickboxing. He's tall. For a middleweight, he's freaking huge, man. And Bolkaev was swinging wild and just getting caught by knees, getting caught by twos. Belaguri's, I apologize, I'm saying that name wrong. His counters were amazing. And then the fight that opened up the card, Canadian Melissa Croden got a TKO win over Tainara Lisboa, and Canadian hometown fighter, starting the card with a KO. That was great for the sake of the crowd atmosphere, and that's UFC Vancouver, man. It was a really, really fun card. Some weird stuff went down. Dan Miragliotta is on the hot seat right now. Dan Miragliotta better pray that he continues reffing UFC. I think if I was the UFC, I'd say, Dan, look, you've been a referee for a while, man. We're not going to fire you, but go practice your craft in the minor leagues. Go do some LFA fights. Go do some A1 fights. Go do maybe some PFL fights even, and then come back to the big leagues when you're ready for it. That would be that's my stance on things. But it was a really, really fun card, and some statement wins. Now, what I want to do really quickly before I tune out is do a little matchmaking here, because there were 4 ranked fights on that main card, and kind of do some matchmaking for some of these guys and see where they go from here. Starting with the main event, Brendan Allen called out Hamzat, called out DDP, and called out Strickland. The Hamzat call out, I respect it. You're not getting that fight right away. I think with RDR losing, it pretty much solidified that it's going to be Hamzat versus Imavov for the belt, which is, justified. Imavov has been at the top of that rankings for a bit now, and he's had statement wins over Allen, over Caio Borralho. So I think, Allen's probably a win away. I'd like to see Allen probably fight DDP, man, and I think that would be an interesting fight, especially as a 5-rounder, for a couple reasons. I think DDP showed in that Hamzat fight he's got serious issues with the grappling, and specifically that, not the takedown defense. Well, the takedown defense was not good, but when your back is against the mat, when you're on your back, like being able to get up, being able to use submission attempts and use different positions to, get up and get striking, which is where DDP probably prefers to be. And it looked bad, and I get Hamzat's a different level, but Brendan Allen is an elite grappler, and I think if you did Allen versus DDP, it would be a fun fight, and I think it would really test DDP's grappling, because if DDP doesn't fix the grappling, he's never going to be a champion again. He's never going to fight for a title again. So this would be a good test for him, and for Allen, he's going to move up in the rankings by quite a bit, and it just makes sense rankings-wise. And I think you probably end up doing Strickland versus Fluffy Hernandez. I think that's the fight to make. Strickland called him out, and I think it would be... Strickland's logic for it was great. He said, hey, I know I can wrestle Hamzat, but I got to prove it. Let me fight American Hamzat, which is Fluffy, who shoots a bunch of takedowns and pushes an insane pace. And if Strickland can handle that and show that he's ready for the belt, do it. And then if Fluffy ends up manhandling Strickland, then he's ready for the belt and do it. As for RDR, I'm not sure where he goes from here. He fought 4 times this year, and the gas tank thing's been an issue from before the UFC, as I touched on earlier. I think RDR needs to take a little bit of time, because he was super active. And that's great, and you can be super active, but it always catches up. It caught up with Pereira, it caught up with Izzy, it caught up with Volk. It always catches up with these guys when they're so active. And RDR fought 4 times this year. He fought in January against Kevin Holland. He fought 2 more times, and then he fought tonight against Brendan Allen. And that could be something to do with the fatigue, right? RDR is not a small 185er. He might be the biggest 185er in the division. So putting yourself through that type of weight cut 4 times in a calendar year within 12 months, within 10 and a half months, is crazy. It's crazy. So give yourself some time, have a longer camp, have a more sustainable weight cut, and hopefully the gas tank doesn't get zapped as much. For sure. I think Mike Malott's there on the border of the welterweight rankings. it wasn't exactly like a crazy convincing performance tonight by any means, but it was a good one nonetheless, and I think it's probably going to earn him a shot at someone deeper into the top 15. He's going to take Kevin Holland's spot at 15, you would imagine. I think him versus like a Jeff Neal could be a cool fight. Him versus maybe Gilbert Burns. Him versus Colby, maybe, but is Colby ever going to fight again? Probably not. So that could be a cool fight. Kevin Holland's just going to keep fighting, man. Once his nuts heal, he's gonna be back at it. He said he wanted to fight a sixth time this year, which props to Kevin Holland. I am not a Kevin Holland hater. It is frustrating because he shows, borderline championship potential with his skill set, and it's clear that he just wants to fight for paychecks. But he's a fighter, and he fights every time, and every time he's game. And his only losses, and we'll see how the Mike Malott one ages, but his like most of his losses are against legit 185ers, and the 170ers he's lost to are legit 170ers. So we'll see how the Mike Malott one ages. We'll see how the D-Rod one ages. But Kevin Holland, he's going to fight someone, and it's going to be fun, and he's going to fight again in 2 or 3 months, and that's going to be that. Amin Zahabi, we were talking about him earlier. I think Figueiredo's probably the move for him coming off of a win like that. Cheeto Vera's 7th in the world. Zahabi's 9th. So Zahabi's going to move to 7 or 8. Probably Figgy. Figgy's probably the one. And, whoever wins that fight, we're talking about being maybe ready for the belt, depending on how many more times Merab defends it until then, or, another win away. And I could easily see that happening. And Cheeto Vera, I'm kind of tired of this Cheeto Vera thing. I think Cheeto Vera is a really fun fighter, but he's so hot and cold with his fights. And, a lot of his wins haven't aged great. They're against people who are a little older, a little more chinny. So just give him someone towards the bottom of the rankings. Honestly, Cejudo just got matched up against Talbot. I would have loved to see Cejudo versus Cheeto at one point. It did get booked at one point. I think Cejudo pulled out. So there's some fun fights he's going to fight an up-and-comer towards the bottom of the rankings, probably David Martinez or Vinicius Oliveira. I think the Oliveira fight would be fun. And and then, I was talking about flyweight matchmaking a little earlier. I think Minnow Fior is probably one win away just because she just fought for the belt and lost. And it's probably going to be Natalia Silva next for the belt at women's flyweight. And you know what? That's fine because I think the next fight we're getting at women's flyweight at MSG in November, Shevchenko versus Weili, is one of the best, maybe the best women's fight of all time. In my opinion, it's for sure the best skill for skill. I think Kayla Harrison versus Nunes is going to be huge too. But, this fight skill for skill. Zhang Weili and Valentina Shevchenko are two of the best women fighters of all time, period. Two of the best fighters of all time, period. So I'm really excited for that one, and I think Natalia Silva, who's she's a Taekwondo style. It's something different that division hasn't seen in a while. I think she'd be next in line, and if Minnow Fior can win another one against someone like Alexa Grasso in the meantime, that's great. And yeah, man, that was UFC Vancouver. It was fun. It was fun to watch, despite Dan Murgliata just royally screwing things up and some weird nut shots and stuff like that. These Canadian cards always seem to be weird. They always do 2 of them a year. They always seem to be weird. And it's funny because, Canadian MMA, it's getting bigger, but obviously Canadian MMA is not where some other countries are, like US, like Brazil, like Russia, like even UK, I would in my opinion. And it's funny because they do like 2 of these Canadian cards a year, and these Canadian cards are always the same people. Like every time. It's always Mike Malott, it's always Zahabi, it's always Jasudavicius, it's always Jourdain. It's always these same like 4 or 5 Canadians on the main card, which I understand because you can't put on a card in a country and not have the country's, fighters, the hometown fighters. So I get it. But I'd really like to see some of these Canadians, fighting outside their home country, and taking a fight in U.S. on a pay-per-view card or on another fight night card because, you can't. It is unfair. You're building up these Canadians. Like Mike Malott is entering the rankings, and Mike Malott in his UFC, at least in recent memories, fought 1 fight outside of the U.S. and that was I don't even he might have pulled out of that fight in UFC Denver. He genuinely might have pulled out of that fight. So yeah, when's the last time Mike Malott? Yeah, Mike Malott, his last 5 fights are all in Canada. So this guy is entering the rankings, and he's yet to fight a fight in his last 5 outside of Canada. Like, that's crazy. So, like, I'd like to see some of these Canadian fighters getting on cards, especially the ones that are starting to get up there in the rankings, like Zahabi, like Mike Malott. Win some fights in other people's soil, instead of always getting these fights in Canada. I'm not saying they're always favorable fights. Jose Aldo was not a favorable fight for Zahabi, but, having that hometown advantage, it matters, especially on the judges' scorecard, it matters. Zahabi's had 2 close fights in his last 2 that were both on his home soil. If it's flipped and he's fighting Jose Aldo in Brazil, or he's fighting Chito Vera in LA, which is where Cheeto's from, or Miami, or wherever it is, right? Are the crowd reactions different? Do those sway the judges a little more? I'm not saying it is or it isn't, but I understand you have to stack these cards with Canadians and stuff. I get it, but let's get these guys, specifically the guys who are in the rankings, let's get them fights in enemy territory instead of always having that home court advantage. That's what I think. That's my 2 cents. And yeah, UFC Vancouver was great. Next week, UFC 321. I am so excited. I mean, Tom Aspinall is one of my favorite fighters, and I think the Ciryl Gane fight is a lot closer than people think. I think because we've seen Ciryl fight for the title twice and fall short twice, I think everyone's writing off Ciryl Gane, and I still think Aspinall will win, but I think Cyril's a much tougher test for him, and I will dive more into that on my UFC 321 preview podcast later this week. For now, UFC Vancouver is in the books. UFC 321 coming up from Abu Dhabi. I cannot wait. 2 title fights, some really, really good main card and prelim fights. Over the moon. And this was episode 1 of the pod, and I appreciate anyone staying to the end of this podcast. Any of my friends or family, I appreciate all of you so very much. I'm not expecting anything out of doing this podcast. I'm just doing it to have some fun, get my takes out there, and practice talking in front of a camera, even if it's in my apartment bedroom with a little webcam and a mini mic that I bought off Amazon, yesterday. It's practice in front of a camera. It's something to put on the resume, and I'm really thankful for everyone who's supporting me and helping me out in this, and I'm excited to keep doing it. NFL pod will be next. I'll be reacting to week 7 of the NFL season, and we'll have more on the way. We'll have UFC 321 preview pod. We'll react to week 7 of the NFL season. We'll preview week 8 of the NFL season, and we're going, baby. We're going. We're making this happen, and I'm really excited. So I appreciate all of you. I'll see you next time.